No Time Like the Past fits in with an episode like The Gift, where Serling was trying to say something important about humanity, but it comes off much more preachy than sentimental or poignant. As the title suggests, we also see the time travel concept used again, which isn't something I'd usually complain about. The premise just wasn't used in a way that made for an overly interesting trip into the zone, although there are a few components to the overall episode that work well. Let's take a look. With the help of his friend Harvey, a physicist named Paul Driscoll is set to go back in time. A large machine has the ability to place him at certain moments throughout history, where he plans to stop disasters from happening. First up, Driscoll arrives in Hiroshima, mere hours before the atomic bomb is dropped.
This is not just a request. It's in the nature of a prayer.
He pleads with the police captain to evacuate as much of the city as possible, but the captain doesn't listen and the city is still destroyed with the same amount of human casualties. Next is Nazi Germany, 1939. Driscoll plans on assassinating Adolf Hitler during one of his speeches. He fails after a hotel maid enters his room and later when his rifle malfunctions. Paul escapes to another time period before Nazi officers can nab him. Finally, he arrives aboard the RMS Lusitania in 1915, minutes before it's to be torpedoed by German forces. The ship's captain hears Driscoll out, but has him taken away when he dismisses Paul's warning as nonsense. Returning to the present, the time traveler resigns himself to the possibility that the past may not be capable of being significantly changed. His friend Harvey brings up that if he did alter something, it may create an even bigger calamity. Fed up with mankind's more recent penchant for blood and suffering, he decides to retire to a town called Homeville, Indiana, in the year 1881. Hoping for peaceful living for the rest of his days, Driscoll plans on not heavily affecting anything from the time period. When he gets there, he soon realizes that the temptation to right historical wrongs is stronger than he thought. He regretfully lets President James A. Garfield be shot the day after he arrives, and soon finds himself in debates with people of the time period who lack his hindsight. After meeting a school teacher named Abigail Sloan, Driscoll begins falling for her, while trying to resist the temptation to become too involved. His resolve is put to the test when he realizes the local school is to be set ablaze by the lantern of a runaway carriage the next day. Children will be inside, practicing their singing for the 4th of July celebration. With this weighing heavily on him, Paul must decide to interfere and save the kids, or preserve the timeline and watch it all happen. While curiously, no producer is listed, director Justice Addis was back for his third and final Zone episode. In terms of his direction, there is stuff to like. I love how that opening scene looks. Actually, pretty much any time the main character is in the present, it looks great. That vast room this giant time machine is located in gave me the Obsolete Man vibes. The symmetrical shadows gracing the wall and spotlight on Driscoll filled in this nebulous void perfectly. I know the Harvey character is just standing on a big cylinder, but it's the composition of the shots and how they're lit that really look fantastic. Also, whenever Paul time travels and the fog kicks up, especially the first instance, it was a fun watch. The framing of some of these angles gave the whole setting a sense of elegance that really pops in black and white. Addis's other installments were strong in their own right, but he didn't have anything that looked quite like this. Huge credit to the lighting team and director of photography, Robert Pittick, for these beauties. There are a couple other notable visuals. At the end of the Hiroshima sequence, we see the effects of the bomb going off from inside the police captain's office. The window explodes and debris fills the room, leaving only a picture of the captain's wife and daughter, which also is destroyed after a moment. This was actually an impressive practical effect. However, the timing of it comes off a little strange. Driscoll leaves the room after begging the captain to heed his words, and 10 seconds later, the explosion transpires. It was just a little quick is all. Some of the most notable shots here aren't even original to the show. Adolf Hitler shows up for real in archive footage. I believe you even hear his voice in the background during the Germany scene. At one point, you see Hitler through the scope of a rifle. There's one other shot in particular in there that is a bit off. When the hotel maid enters Driscoll's room, the camera pans over, following her put a new towel in the bathroom. It looks like Pittick or the camera operator slipped or something because it tilts up for no reason that I could see. At almost a minute and a half, it was a long cut, so I wouldn't be surprised if this was the best take from a performance angle, and the editor just went with it. Not a huge deal, but it was kind of weird to see an error like that. The Germany sequence in general was a bit of a letdown. If you're gonna try and kill Hitler in a Twilight Zone episode, go all the way with it. Would have been an interesting choice to see Driscoll try and get close to the leader, attempting to take him out in more of an espionage type way. The gun not working when he had the shot was also kind of lame, although the Nazis who barge into the room do speak actual German with the hotel maid and not just English with a German accent, so points for that, I suppose. The Lusitania scene is the least of these three. It's pretty much the Hiroshima sequence with a different type of bomb going off. I think a lot of these scenes would have been improved with a different lead actor. Dana Andrews seems charismatic enough, and I'm sure he had other interesting roles, but he seemed miscast as Driscoll. Maybe a slightly younger actor with a bit more pep could have made everything more watchable. He had absolutely zero chemistry with Patricia Breslin, the actress who played Abigail. Maybe it was the 22-year age difference or the fact that their romance is so forced, but it came off like these two had the same level of attraction to each other as Green Lantern and the color yellow.
I wish I could come in.
Why can't you? Everything is possible. Everything.
The one really well-performed scene is when Paul stands up to a local man in Homeville named Hanford. This guy is very pro-imperialism, among other things.
We should take the American fleet, send it over to the Orient, and plant the American flag. Planting her deep, planting her high, planting her proud. All this silly conciliatory nonsense about giving the Indians lands. As if you could actually make savages understand treaties.
Building up since Driscoll's long-winded monologue at the top of the show, he lets this guy have it. You can feel Rod's personal feelings flowing through Andrews in this sequence, and it made for a compelling exchange.
I'm just some kind of sick idiot who's seen too many young men die because of too many old men like you who fight their battles at dining room tables. I take offense at armchair warriors who don't know what a shrapnel wound feels like, or what death smells like after 3 days in the sun.
Unfortunately, that's about all the positives I could muster up about this one. Rod's script doesn't have the gravity to successfully portray a still valid message this time around. He could be hit and miss with this kind of thing. When he hits, we get something really special. When he misses, we get something closer to No Time Like the Past. It feels like Driscoll is just complaining the entire installment while wagging his finger so close to the audience's face that he's picking our nose.
We live in a cesspool, a septic tank, a gigantic sewage complex. The keeper of the sewer? Man. Everything he designs as an art for dying is his excuse for living. We live in an exquisite bedlam by the fact that we don't recognize it as insanity.
What was needed was a personal touch, and although they tried with Abigail's inclusion, we never came close to that. Even Serling's 1958 script, The Time Element, which was a quasi-teasy pilot that aired as an episode of Westinghouse Desilu Playhouse, has a better setup with Pearl Harbor as the event to be stopped. Before we get into the twist, I should mention who showed up here from other episodes because it is a handful. Patricia Breslin returned after the Season 2 classic Nick of Time opposite William Shatner. Again, she's fine, but without any connection to Dana Andrews, her role fell flat. Malcolm Atterbury and his unique look made his second and final appearance after Mr. Denton on Doomsday way back in only the third episode of this series that was aired. Robert Cornthwaite was back after Season 3's underwhelming showdown with Rance McGrew in a much more memorable small role that he filled well. Marjorie Bennett showed up in her third and final zone. Bennett was fortunate enough to have a part in the seminal Kick the Can episode the previous season. Paul can't help himself. He tries to stop the carriage that's set to destroy the school building by unhitching the horses from it. He gets in an argument with Professor Elliot, the snake oil salesman driving the carriage, and ends up causing the very accident he was trying to prevent. The building burns, with the children inside. That evening, Abigail meets him in the town square, where Paul cryptically explains how he knew the building was going to be set on fire. After an emotional goodbye, he travels back to the present and recites to Harvey that what really needs to be changed isn't the past, but the future. Yesterday is sacred and set in stone, but tomorrow can still be saved.
The school building. Oh my God. My dear God.
Apropos of nothing, I just love how ridiculously over the top that zoom was. Anyway, Driscoll's ending speech tries to tie everything into a nice bow about learning from the past to change the future.
Do something about the tomorrows. They're the ones that count. Tomorrows. God, let there be tomorrows.
It's a nice thought, delivered a bit tediously. After going on a somewhat drab adventure with this character, the moral just rang hollow. No Time Like the Past has a few decent crackles of life hidden beneath an hour of slow-moving story, but that still places it far from a recommendation. Driscoll's statement at the end is right. Tomorrow is what counts. Leave this one in the past, floating around somewhere in the Twilight Zone.